Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on Newsline Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's get you the big stories that we're focusing on tonight. Almost 5 weeks after Sheikh Hasina resigned as Bangladesh Prime Minister and fled to India amidst a violent uprising, the country's War Crimes Tribunal has said it will seek her extradition and put her on trial for carrying out massacres. Mohammad Tajul Islam, the chief prosecutor of Bangladesh's International Crimes Tribunal, told journalists on Sunday, as the main perpetrator has fled the country, we will start the legal procedure to bring her back. Addressing a press conference, Tajul Islam said necessary steps would be taken to bring the former Prime Minister back under the extradition treaty with India to try her on charges of mass killings during the student-led protests in July and August. He said we will file an application with the International Crimes Tribunal when it resumes its functions to issue arrest warrants against all the absconding accused, including Sheikh Hasina, in connection with the cases filed for mass killings and crimes against humanity. Bangladesh has a criminal extradition treaty with India, which was signed in 2013 while Sheikh Hasina's government was in power. As she has been made the main accused in the massacres in Bangladesh, we will try to legally bring her back to Bangladesh to face trial. That is what he said. He added that a decision would be taken after consulting with the government about amendment of the existing International Crimes Tribunal Act for holding trial of the new cases filed with the ICT. The chief prosecutor said information, documents and evidence against the accused persons will have to be collected from across the country, and those will have to be compiled, examined and placed properly before the tribunal, which are very much challenging and huge tasks. According to Tajul Islam, the International Crimes Tribunal and its investigation team will have to be reconstituted by appointing new judges and investigators, as previous judges, prosecution team and investigating agency appointed by the previous government have stepped down after the interim government was formed in the country following the fall of the Hasina-led government. The International Crimes Tribunal was set up by Sheikh Hasina in 2010 to probe atrocities during the 1971 independence war from Pakistan. Weeks of student-led demonstrations in Bangladesh escalated into mass protests last month, with Sheikh Hasina quitting as Prime Minister and fleeing by helicopter to old ally India on the 5th of August, ending her iron-fisted 15-year rule. Hasina's government was accused of widespread human rights abuses, including the mass detention and extrajudicial killings of her political opponents. The 76-year-old former Bangladesh Premier has not been seen in public since fleeing Bangladesh. Her presence in India has infuriated Dhaka. The interim government, led by Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, recently revoked Hasina's diplomatic passport. India and Bangladesh have a bilateral extradition treaty, but a clause in the treaty says extradition might be refused if the offence is of a political character. Last week, Yunus said Sheikh Hasina should keep quiet while she's in exile in India until she's brought home for trial. He told a news agency if India wants to keep her until the time Bangladesh wants her back, the condition would be that she has to keep quiet. Yunus's government has been under public pressure to demand Sheikh Hasina's extradition and carry out a trial over hundreds of demonstrators being killed during the weeks of unrest that ultimately toppled her government. More than 600 people were killed in the weeks leading up to Hasina's ouster, according to a preliminary United Nations report, which also suggests that the toll was likely an underestimate. Last month, Bangladesh opened an investigation led by retired High Court judge into hundreds of enforced disappearances by security forces during Sheikh Hasina's rule. The question is, if Sheikh Hasina fails to get political asylum in another country and Bangladesh does in fact insist on her extradition, what will India do? How much longer can India give shelter to Hasina? Could shielding the former Bangladesh Premier alienate the new government in Dhaka and adversely impact India-Bangladesh ties at a time when there's already a strong anti-India sentiment prevailing in the neighbouring country? What should India do? Shield an old friend and trusted ally and risk antagonizing a strategically important neighbour, or prioritize bilateral ties in an increasingly uncertain and hostile region and risk losing credibility with friends and allies? Well, so that really is the million-dollar question that India's foreign policy makers are currently faced with, the Sheikh Hasina conundrum. As we mentioned, she has been in India since she fled her country on the 5th of August, when she resigned amidst a violent uprising in Bangladesh. student-led protests have in fact led to hundreds of protesters being killed. Now she is currently in exile in India and waiting for political asylum in another country, one of them being the United Kingdom. But she hasn't got the green signal so far. Therefore, the question is, what is India likely to do? Okay, let's introduce our panel. Joining me on Global Lens tonight is Salim Samad, senior journalist and columnist in Bangladesh. He joins us live from Dhaka. In a moment, we're also hoping to be joined by Shohini Bose, Associate Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation from Kolkata, and Ambassador Veena Sikri, former Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Salim Samad, if I could start with you. First and foremost, going by what the Chief Prosecutor of Bangladesh's International Crimes Tribunal said on Sunday, is it almost a certainty now and only a matter of when and not if Bangladesh is going to formally seek Sheikh Hasina's extradition from India for her to face trial in your country?
Yes, thank you for having me. Actually, the ICT or whatever the court you're mentioning, the cases in Dhaka or in Bangladesh, this is not the issue when Sheikh Hasina will be extradited. Actually, we are waiting for the Human Rights Commission, which is being in Bangladesh, and they are going to submit a report. Once the report is finalized and hand over, there will be a formal request to India as well to United Nations to deport Sheikh Hasina to Dhaka to face the trial, which is based on the UN report, because that is possibly can be argued that it is a credible report, not the court which is in Bangladesh, which is of course not very independent.
All right. In fact, this is something that even the head of the interim government of Bangladesh, Professor Muhammad Yunus, had hinted at last week when he spoke to a news agency. He said that India can keep Sheikh Hasina until Bangladesh seeks her extradition, but the condition would have to be that she stays quiet and does not make political statements from India. If you could explain to our viewers, what are the kind of cases that have been registered against Sheikh Hasina since the 5th of August when she resigned as the Bangladesh Prime Minister and fled to India, and what is the exact nature of these charges that she faces?
First of all, let me go back and let me explain that the first meeting or phone appointment, the phone conversation with Narendra Modi and Dr. Yunus was the starting point, where two issues have been mentioned, which has also been reported to PTI. The same thing has been repeated in PTI. So you can understand it has already been told to Narendra Modi that she should not talk. She should be make sure that she doesn't communicate. So this was one, and of course, Professor Yunus also mentioned that there is likely that she should be deported to face trial in Bangladesh. And that trial has nothing to do with the War Crimes Tribunal or the Bangladesh court or the magistrate court, wherever there is a charges of murder, of killing of students. So officially, only yesterday, the figure is now 640 students have been killed officially, but the figure is much more, which are non-students. So she will have to face the trial for killing the students. So whatever the number of cases that you have heard of, whatever the number of cases I have reported, that possibly will not affect the demand or the request to deport or extradite Sheikh Hasina to Bangladesh. It will be, we have to wait till the UN report is published.
Wait till the UN report is published. Now, I believe that more than 100 criminal cases have been filed against Sheikh Hasina. She's been accused of carrying out massacres and mass killings of not just student protesters, but also in some cases opposition leaders, many of whom were detained. The question really is that if Sheikh Hasina does in fact face trial in Bangladesh, what kind of a sentence is she looking at? And how serious do you believe the Mohammed Yunus-led interim government is about ensuring that Sheikh Hasina is in fact extradited and put on trial?
Well, you are very right. So the extradition we have to wait for several months. Not this year, maybe next year. This is what I assume. First of all, the charges of murder is mostly students. So it is the students who demanded that former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina should be tried in a court. But of course, as I have mentioned, the court in Bangladesh is not independent. They are all politically motivated because there have been appointments of judges which have a party affiliation. So cleaning these party affiliated judges will take a lot of time. So obviously there will be no credibility in the judgment by those courts. So you have to wait for the UN report to be published, and then they will file a case in the Hague, the ICG court in the Hague in Amsterdam. Sorry, in Netherlands.
In the Netherlands, you believe that this trial will take place at the International Court of Justice at The Hague. We also have Ambassador Veena Sikri, former Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh, joining us at this point. We will go across to ma'am in just a moment after this quick break on Global Lens. Stay with us.
Hey, careful, huh?
My daddy got it from abroad. Hey, disaster!
How will you pay for the loss now?
In stock market, you should take risk as per your capacity and knowledge. Trade in options very carefully.
Wow, Dikra! Absolutely perfect. Take risk with full understanding.
समझ कर इन्वेस्ट कर
Fast.
My God, isn't she your daughter?
Yes.
She's playing football. This is boys' game. Make her study. If she doesn't get a good job, she will get a good match. Will you win the world by playing football?
Yes, auntie. My daughter will win the world by playing football.
Let's go to Germany.
World's largest football talent hunt. News 9 Indian Tigers and Tigresses. In association with DFB Pokal, Bundesliga, BVB and India Football Center. Train and play matches in Europe. Register now and fly to Germany. IndianTigersandTigresses.com.
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience. This was the kind of terrain that mountaineers basically climb on. You're talking of peaks of 15,000 and 16,000 feet. You have trouble breathing, the cold, the high altitude, the dizziness, the enemy staring at your face. And in some of those cases, the Pakistanis were not even expending ammunition. They were throwing rocks at the Indian soldiers. That's how close it was.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
This is News 9 Live, India's only digital exclusive live stream. For the early adopters, bringing you the news 24/7. For the smart audiences on the smartest TVs. News 9 Live. Stream now on your smart TVs.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing India's Sheikh Hasina conundrum. Let me go across to Ambassador Veena Sikri at this point. She has served as India's High Commissioner to Bangladesh and knows that country better than most others. Ma'am, thanks for joining me on Global Lens tonight. I want to ask you the most important question that is being asked in India these days in the context of India-Bangladesh ties. That if Sheikh Hasina fails to get political asylum from any of the countries where she is seeking asylum, and Bangladesh insists on her extradition from India. What is India likely to do? What are India's options? The million-dollar question is, should India shield an old friend and a trusted ally and risk antagonizing a strategically important neighbor? Or should India prioritize bilateral ties, with Bangladesh in an increasingly hostile region, and in the process risk losing credibility with its friends and allies? Do you believe this is a major conundrum?
Well, I think we have to be very patient on this situation. I think there is no need to overanalyze it or describe something as a conundrum when we haven't yet come to that stage yet at all. Former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has not made any formal request so far. It is up to her to make the request, and I'm sure that when she makes the request, our government will consider it most sympathetically, because after all, she has been a very good friend of India. She had been Prime Minister in Bangladesh for a long time. India-Bangladesh relations have grown enormously in the last 15 years, and that's something that former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had a lot to do with. Now, if you talk about the whole process of extradition, this is by no means a simple process. We do know from our own experience that, we have people like Vijay Mallya and Nirav Modi, sitting in various countries for tens of years, for decades, and absolutely no progress of any kind. There are a huge amount of legal barriers and legal cases to be gone through, not only in Bangladesh, but also in India. Now, the Bangladesh interim government is there primarily to arrange for elections. So I don't know on what basis they are going into all kinds of legal cases and setting up new courts. And, the credibility of all this new systems that they're putting in place is by no means well established. To give you one example, when Sheikh Hasina was the Prime Minister in Bangladesh and she set up the War Crimes Tribunal in Bangladesh, the defender of the Jamaat-e-Islami, the lawyer defending the Jamaat-e-Islami, was a person called Tajul Islam. And now one of the first things that the interim government has done is to name this same lawyer, Tajul Islam, as the chief prosecutor for the interim government in the war crimes trial. So this, raises a lot of questions and casts a lot of doubt on what is going on actually in Bangladesh, because an interim government, by definition, according to the Bangladesh constitution, is to hold free and fair and inclusive elections within 90 days. That is the mandate that the interim government has. It's only the new parliament who can undertake any kind of reforms, who can make constitutional decisions, who can make appointments, and so on. So I think there are a lot of questions to be raised. And then, in addition to whatever kind of system that the present interim government is looking at or thinking of, what credibility that system will have, there is a whole legal process in India as well to be followed in cases of extradition. Just as we saw in the UK, there is a whole legal process, parts of which are still going on for the extradition requests which are made there. So I don't think we need to jump the gun on these issues. We need to be very sober and careful and look indeed very carefully at what the interim government is trying to do or trying to push for, and what is the constitutionality or legality of what they are doing.
Okay, it of course remains to be seen how soon they're going to hold elections in Bangladesh and whether they will be free and fair. But let me ask you this question, ma'am. You say we should, cross the bridge when we come to it on the matter of extradition. But given the current, state of ties between India and Bangladesh, if you talk to anyone in Bangladesh, you will be told that the anti-India sentiment in that country currently is at an all-time high. Do you, have this concern that many others do, that the longer Sheikh Hasina remains on India's territory, the longer we risk alienating, whether it is the interim government or any other new establishment that comes in, let's say even after the elections?
Again, I think you're jumping the gun. because do we ask this question about our relations with the UK? I mean, we have these cases that I told you, many very famous cases there, Vijay Mallya, Nirav Modi, and many others. But our relationship with the UK is proceeding very fast and very well. There's been an election, there's been a new government. The new government has shown a lot of interest. They've, there are a lot of talks restarting on the FTA and so on. So these things go on. I think relationship between governments, relationship between peoples are very mature. And both countries have to discuss issues. I think here, I don't know, somebody called this as a megaphone diplomacy. We are talking through the media. I don't think this is the way in which such things can be conducted. I don't think this is the way in which such serious matters are to be discussed. So I really do not think that through these kind of talk shows you can raise the various questions and get answers. These are policy matters which the government will consider in all seriousness. And when the point is that when this actually comes to the question, right now it's all in the papers. It's like effervescing. This whole issue is effervescing. Oh, extradition, extradition, extradition. Oh, what will Bangladesh think? What will India? This is all in the media. There has not been a single, our country has indicated, our government has indicated at the highest level that we are very happy to talk to the interim government, very happy to hold discussions with them on whatever subjects they would like to hold discussions on. So let them come up with something that they would like to discuss. So I don't think that, we're talking about some anti-India feeling. This was being talked about even when Sheikh Hasina was the Prime Minister. So I don't think that, the anti-India feeling, if it is there or it's not there, and if it is going to be influenced by, what happens on the extradition case. So please, I really think it's a very, very important and serious matter. And you must trust the government to think about it seriously, to prepare for it seriously, and not to, talk through talk shows on what the policy of government should be on these very, very major and serious matters. Certainly, India does attach the highest importance to its relationship with Bangladesh, and that is why our government has indicated at the very first opportunity about the need to have good relations with Bangladesh. And we do know that we have a 4,000-kilometer land border with Bangladesh and a maritime border as well. So we will attach the highest importance to whatever decision is taken. It will be considered in all seriousness. Okay. But I think there are a lot of questions in between, when you're talking to somebody in Bangladesh about it, have you asked this question? Is the Bangladesh interim government in a constitutional or legal position to prepare for all these issues? You have not asked that question, but you're asking other questions of the Indian government and saying, you tell us what we want to do. So I think,
ma'am, the only reason we do not expect the government of India to come on our show and spell out their strategy for us. The reason we are discussing it is because the chief prosecutor of Bangladesh's International Crimes Tribunal called a press conference 2 days ago and said we are going to seek formal extradition of Sheikh Hasina. It's another matter that, yes, no formal request has been made to New Delhi so far. Let's go back to our Bangladesh guest at this point. Salim Samad, let me ask you this question. Ambassador Sikri says that, does the interim government of Bangladesh even have the powers to seek extradition? Isn't it mandate limited to holding a free and fair election in Bangladesh in a time-bound manner? And even if tomorrow a new government does come in, India will need to take into account the legality and the constitutionality of that government before it takes a decision, if any, on any extradition request that might be made.
Yes, and let me put the record straight. Bangladesh Constitution doesn't, on the 15th Amendment, that has scrapped the provision for a caretaker government. So there is nothing called, there is a deadline for an interim government to hold an election in 90 days or 900 days. So the first thing first is the Supreme Court is already hearing the 15th Amendment, which has been scrapped from the Constitution. So they are reviewing the case. So once the caretaker government is restored by the Supreme Court, obviously then the legitimacy of this interim government, which will turn into a caretaker government, will have the ability to definitely seek India to deport or extradite Sheikh Hasina. And India, I am telling you today, India will definitely send back Sheikh Hasina to Bangladesh. India will not take any responsibility of harming the relationship in South Asia. India
What makes you so confident about that, Salim Samad? If I may ask you, what makes you so confident that Sheikh Hasina will be extradited to Bangladesh by India?
Three things you have to understand. Number one, her phone, all his communication has been cut off. All the devices has been seized in Delhi. Number two, nobody is allowed to meet her. Number one, her daughter who's in Delhi has not met her for more than a month. Her son who's supposed to come to Delhi has not been asked not to come. So there are other issues to prove that India is embarrassed to have Sheikh Hasina even as a guest.
Well, that may be your assumption, sir. That may be your assumption, that India is embarrassed to have her. That may be your assumption.
Of course India is embarrassed. India will be embarrassed. India is not, nobody has met Sheikh Hasina other than Ajit Doval. Nobody in Delhi, nobody in the South Bloc has met or spoke to Hasina. So that gives.
But we don't know that, sir. Maybe it's just not been reported in the media. We don't know for sure whether anybody has met her or not.
Come on, India, definitely the press is very, very vibrant. They will definitely have reported. They will not report it that all his devices has been cut off and nobody is allowed to meet her. So that's one of the interesting things that will happen. India will definitely.
Okay, I still think that you may be making a few assumptions, but I want to ask you another question before I take this back to the ambassador.
Whatever I have said before, everything has come correct.
Okay, we don't have a crystal ball, but I will ask you a follow-up question. You said that, India will not want to harm its relationship with Bangladesh. What exactly do you mean by that?
Today, the Indian High Commissioner has met another advisor. So there are a series of meetings with different advisors. So today, and today's meeting with the advisor is very crucial because they were talking about the project that has been signed, undergoing, or has to be completed. So you can understand the Bangladesh government, the advisor have said that there will be the line of credit and everything will be as it has signed or MOU has been done before. So this is very crucial because the bilateral relationship is not only business, it's also the mega project, the other projects, the infrastructure projects, which India is already in the projects.
Okay, Ambassador Sikri, would you want to respond to what our Bangladeshi guest is saying? Firstly, he says, no one in South Bloc has actually gone and met Sheikh Hasina. She's completely isolated. She can't meet her own family. And India is embarrassed, in his words, to have her as a guest. And he insists that India will not want to jeopardize its ties with Bangladesh by refusing to extradite her.
Well, I think with a guest like Mr. Salim Samad, you don't need anybody from the Indian side because he's speaking for both sides. He knows exactly what is happening on the Bangladesh side, and he says he knows exactly what's happening on the Indian side as well. So then really you don't need anybody else's opinion. I think you just have to listen to him, to come to some kind of a weird conclusion. I am always, let me say once again, that the issue of extradition is a very serious one. It's a very responsible one. And I'm sure the government is considering its own options, its own realities. At the same time, we have right from day one said that we are very happy and willing to talk to the present government and to continue the various projects that had been started under Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Now, when your visitor from Bangladesh is saying that these projects are very important, I'm very glad to hear him say so, because then he is more or less endorsing what former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been doing in the bilateral relations with India. And so in that sense, I think it's a recognition that she was doing the right thing and that these projects should continue. That's fine. We are very happy. The government of India is very happy to continue the projects and to continue the progress in the bilateral relationship, because these projects have always been based on mutual benefit. And the beneficiary of these projects are primarily the people of Bangladesh. And that is why we are very happy and interested to see projects continue, to see them being completed, to see the credit line being utilized, because it's all for the benefit of the people of Bangladesh. So I think in that sense, we are very happy to have this bilateral projects and the bilateral relationship continue to grow and develop. Having said that, I've still maintained that on the question of extradition, which is a very sensitive and highly sensitive matter, there are all kinds of clauses in the extradition treaty. There are political processes and legal processes on both sides, and the way in which these legal processes are conducted, by whom, and so on, all that is very much to be looked into. So I think that we cannot say anything on that just yet, except to say that I'm glad that our High Commissioner is meeting all the advisors and carrying forward the relationship.
Okay, before I take a break, ma'am, I want your thoughts on what Muhammad Yunus, the head of the interim government of Bangladesh, told news agency PTI in an interview just a few days ago. He said at the moment, the India-Bangladesh relationship is under tremendous strain. It is at a low, those are his words. And for the relationship to improve, India will need to come out of the narrative that everyone other than Sheikh Hasina is Islamist in Bangladesh, including the BNP, and that Bangladesh will be in safe hands only with Sheikh Hasina at the helm and not with anyone else. India is a neighbor and that is how it is expected to act. Any thoughts on that?
Well, very clearly, I think if Chief Advisor Professor Muhammad Yunus is making a policy statement, then I don't think it's correct to do it through the media, because I think this more or less, you're speaking through a media channel. It can be defined as megaphone diplomacy. It can be defined in many different ways. I do not know how he comes to the conclusion that India-Bangladesh relations are at a low, because there have been no direct discussions between Professor Muhammad Yunus and anybody on the Indian side. Our Indian High Commissioner has certainly called on him, and our Indian High Commissioner has no doubt reassured him of the importance that India attaches to continuing the relationship with Bangladesh and carrying it to new highs. Now, I think particularly what you mentioned about this term Islamist, I do not know at all how Professor Muhammad Yunus could come to such a conclusion. I think that it is very clear that India is always ready to deal with the government in Bangladesh such as it is, and so we are prepared to deal with Professor Muhammad Yunus. Now, he is the interim government, as was just explained to you. It's quite clear the interim government does not have any constitutional legality at this moment, and the hope is that if the courts in Bangladesh, where they've had a new set of judges, the old set of judges were gheraoed by students and forced to resign, and a new set of judges has come in now, and if your speaker from Bangladesh was assuming that the new set of judges will bring back the article on the caretaker government, and if that happens, then in that case there will be a legitimacy for the government to hold free and fair elections. So that has been the mandated role of a caretaker government all the time. So I think to say that we are calling any other government Islamist is completely incorrect and completely wrong, because nobody has called anybody any names. We have only expressed our interest to work with the government of Bangladesh in the best interest, the mutual interest of the people of India and Bangladesh. And certainly, other than the Awami League, there are many political parties in Bangladesh. There is the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, there is the Jamaat-e-Islami, there is the Workers' Party, there is the Jatiyo Party. There are many parties. Each of them have different policies, different programs that they follow. So I do not know how you can assume that India has given a label to all parties. I think this is not a very fair or a very correct assessment of what is happening in India. But again, this is all being done through the media. I don't think there's anybody in India who has defined all parties in Bangladesh as Islamist. I don't think so. I've not seen it in any media reference. I don't know whether you have seen it. You may have seen it. Since you are quoting the PTI interview, you may have seen it. May have seen some such reference, but I have not. And I can certainly say that India is willing to deal with the government of the day in Bangladesh and to carry forward the bilateral relationship in the best interests of the people of both countries.
Okay. Salim Samad, the ambassador is saying that, Muhammad Yunus may have drawn some erroneous and even unjust conclusions in his assessment of how India sees political parties in Bangladesh. But that apart, I want to ask you about the domestic situation prevailing in Bangladesh at the moment. Now, Of course, one primary mandate of the interim government headed by Professor Yunus is to conduct free and fair elections. Another is that he is expected to restore law and order across Bangladesh. But you know, there is a strong sense that even though it's been over a month since Sheikh Hasina fled the country and Mohammad Yunus has been sort of the head of the interim government for quite some time now, it seems as if there is a perception that he's not in control. This government is simply not in control. There is still a lot of chaos and confusion and violence that are prevailing across Bangladesh. How do you look at that?
I will not deny that there are several things that is not taking place. But let me tell you one thing, that Ambassador Pinashiki was in Bangladesh when Sheikh Khaleda Zia came to power in 2001. And at that time, there was a lot of chaos for the next 5 to 6 months. So, I mean, it seemed that Sheikh Khaleda Zia was not in power. The Shibina Sikri will bear me out if I'm telling not the truth. That it took several months because there was so much of chaos, riot, and of course, the persecution of the Hindus, the Ahmadiyyas, and of course, the Buddhists, you name it. And about 100 journalists were attacked and they were in prison. And when Khaleda Zia came to power, I'm talking about there's a shift of power through an election in 2001. You can understand. So there's no government. So Yunus was possibly not prepared. He was absolutely not prepared. He was in Paris, watching the Olympics, and of course the students who had organized this revolt were also. I strongly have a hunch they also did not have any backup plans. And of course, Sheikh Hasina also didn't have a backup plan. That how will she leave the country? So I understand it is not because of month and 2 months. Things are taking shape. It will take a few more months. And of course, there are so many crises. So you can understand the crisis means, of course, the India-Bangladesh relations is, of course, being often been dented by different groups, different vested groups. So you can understand it will take. But I believe that Professor Yunus, who can really make 20 million women out of poverty from the villages, and I believe he can also salvage this country from worse to better in the next few months.
There's a lot of optimism, but fact of the matter is he does look like he's not in control, and there seems to be utter lawlessness across Bangladesh right now. And it's interesting you say that perhaps the student protesters did not have a backup plan. It looks like even the Yunus government at the moment does not really have a plan. And of course, many have also questioned whether this was entirely an organic student-driven protest or whether there were external influences at work as well. But let me take this back to Ambassador Veena Sikri at this point. Ambassador Sikri, I don't know if the Mohammad Yunus government really has a plan or what the students who supposedly led the uprising against Sheikh Hasina might do next. But fact of the matter is that there are a lot of concerns across Bangladesh and in the region about the utter lawlessness that we have seen in that country in recent weeks. How much of a concern do you believe the current situation in Bangladesh is for India from its own security standpoint? You did mention earlier that we share a long border with Bangladesh. It is somewhat porous, and in the past we have had security concerns with an influx of residents coming in from there. Do you believe that that is a situation that could actually get serious for India in the days and weeks ahead, especially if this kind of lawlessness continues in Bangladesh?
Oh, yes, most certainly. I think it's a very major security concern for India because, as you said, and as I had said earlier, that we have a 4,000-kilometer long land border with Bangladesh, and we have a very, close maritime border as well. Of course, we have worked with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government to settle these issues, and that itself is a very major factor that, in a very friendly and understanding way, the land boundary issue and the maritime boundary issue were settled between the governments of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and the governments in India, and largely in the last 10 years, Prime Minister Modi is at the helm. So I think that this is a very important point. It shows that how peace and stability and development and democracy are very vital for both India and Bangladesh. And I'm very surprised to say Mr. Salim Samad pointing out to the fact that, yes, when I was High Commissioner in Bangladesh and the Prime Minister was Begum Khalida Zia, there were riots then too. So does the riots at that time and the riots at this time justify each other? Except that I can point to one similarity, which is that the riots at that time were also targeting the Hindus. Almost completely they were targeting the Hindus. A lot of Hindus were that time, the minorities, communities, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, there were killings, there were burnings, there were rapes. It was terrible. And this time it's almost a repeat situation of that. So is this what happens in Bangladesh every time a government changes? Is this the kind of democratic tradition that Bangladesh has developed? I think that this is a very worrisome pointer that Mr. Salim Samad is giving to all of us, that this is what happens in Bangladesh every time. I mean, if people are genuinely committed to a democratic way of life and a democratic way of governance, then this should not be happening at all. And there should be security for every individual.
For everyone. And given, that there are so many attacks happening on the minorities, it's unfortunate that Professor Mohammed Yunus is in denial about it. He actually said in that interview that India raising the issue is just an excuse.
I mean, this is very unfair where you see that so many people are losing their lives and it is being dismissed by the chief advisor as being, don't bother about it. Oh, but this is Awami League. Does it mean that Awami League lives are less important than any other lives? And how do you know? I don't think the Hindu community is so entirely political that all of them, one and all, man, woman and child, are all with the Awami League. This kind of a justification for violence given by the chief advisor and given by Mr. Salim Samad is very worrisome, because it shows that Bangladesh people, including the leadership, is not attaching importance to peace or stability or democracy or development. Because without stability, there can be no development at all.
There can be no development, and the turmoil, a factory is being burnt exactly in the name of politics.
Factories have been burnt. 10,000 Ansars who were contributing to maintaining law and order, they've been dismissed. The police force is still not back at work because they're extremely worried about being victimized and being punished for whatever they may have done. So they're still not back at force. And certainly, the students that you have spoken about, it seems the entire, it's the Islami Chhatra Shibir, which is the students wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami that has taken over the entire students movement.
Exactly.
So I think many questions that arise and very many factors that a neighboring country, a close neighbor like India, would like to discuss, but there are no discussions so far with the government.
No discussions taking place, and it's not just a concern for India or for the region. The lawlessness should worry the people of Bangladesh. But I'm completely out of time. On that note, Ambassador Veena Sikri and Salim Samad, thank you very much for joining me on Global Lens tonight. All right, time for us to take a quick break here on the show, but there's more on the other side. Stay with us.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
In the heart of New York, an Indian spectacle unfolds. Step into the world of the elite saga, featuring influential Indians who've rocked the globe. From culinary geniuses,
this has been nothing less than a dream,
to the wisdom of sages.
And which is why success can never be spelt without you.
Discover the stories behind the stars. Experience the magic behind the scenes. At the first Indian event at the Statue of Liberty. Watch the Elite Saga, streaming only on News 9 Plus. Download now.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Former US President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris will face off tonight in Philadelphia in their first presidential debate. As new polls show, the race for the White House remains tight with no clear leader. The 2024 campaign season's second general election debate and the first showdown between Trump and Harris is expected to be a clash of contrasts. The ABC hosted 90-minute debate will take place tonight at Philadelphia's National Constitution Center. This comes months after the June debate between Trump and incumbent President Joe Biden, who later announced an end to his re-election bid and endorsed Harris after facing immense backlash over his lackluster performance and concerns around his age and fitness. The Tuesday night debate will not have a live audience. The candidates' microphones will be muted when it's not their turn to speak, and they will not be allowed to have notes either. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris averages 49% support across recent polls, while former President Donald Trump stands at 48% according to a new poll of polls. The average suggests no clear leader in the contest heading into tonight's presidential debate. One of the polls found that 72% of registered voters across the United States say they plan to watch the debate, with 30% saying they think it will matter a great deal for their choice for president. All right, news from North Korea now. North Korean leader Kim Jong Un has said the country is now implementing a nuclear force construction policy to increase the number of nuclear weapons exponentially. In a speech on North Korea's founding anniversary on Monday, Kim said the country must prepare more thoroughly its nuclear capability and readiness to use it properly at any given time in ensuring the security rights of the state. A strong military presence is needed to face the various threats posed by the United States and its followers, he said.
North Korea's Kim Jong Un has laid out plans to, quote, exponentially increase the country's nuclear weapons, according to state media KCNA on Tuesday. They quoted a speech Kim gave the day before to mark North Korea's founding anniversary. KCNA also reported that a so-called nuclear force construction policy is in the works, which it says would allow Pyongyang to more thoroughly prepare, quote, nuclear capability and its readiness to use it properly at any given time and ensuring the security rights of the state. Kim, in his speech, emphasized the need for a strong military to counter threats from the US and its allies, citing a grave threat from a US-led nuclear military bloc in the region. Germany last month joined the United Nations Command, which is led by the United States and South Korea. That move heightened tensions with the North, which denounces the border monitoring force for being what it calls an illegal war organization. The state media reports of Kim's speech came hours ahead of a meeting of the defense ministers of the UN Command member states in the south.
Asia's most powerful storm this year, Typhoon Yagi, marched across northern Vietnam, killing dozens and inflicting widespread damage to infrastructure and factories as it churned westward. Here's a report.
Typhoon Yagi left dozens dead in northern Vietnam as it barreled westwards, preliminary government estimates showed on Monday. The country's infrastructure has also been hit by Asia's most powerful storm of this year, as the weather agency warned of more floods and landslides. Widespread damage could be seen in the Vietnamese capital Hanoi on Monday, with downed trees covering the streets and signs ripped from their hoardings. The typhoon swept across Vietnam's northeastern coast on Saturday, cutting power to millions, flooding highways and disrupting telecommunications networks. This usually busy bridge in Phu Tho province was swept away. Authorities said initial investigations suggested there were 8 vehicles on the bridge when it collapsed. Despite being downgraded to a tropical depression on Sunday, Yagi has brought a halt to economic activity in many industrial hubs. Managers and workers at industrial parks and factories in Hai Phong, a coastal city of 2 million, said on Monday that power was out and equipment was being salvaged from the rain. These pictures show an LG electronics factory, the walls of which collapsed following the typhoon's impact. Local resident Bui Van Thuy began cleaning up the damage to his shop on Sunday.
The damage done to this community is extremely severe. Most of the roof was blown away or the ceiling caved in. It may take 3 to 4 years for this place to look the same again because the damage is so terrible. The surroundings look like an apocalypse. Never before has a storm dealt this much damage to us.
State-run power provider EVN said 75% of the 5.7 million customers that lost power over the weekend now had electricity restored.
On Monday, Apple unveiled its long-awaited artificial intelligence-boosted iPhone 16 and promised improvements in its Siri personal assistant as it rolled out new software beginning in test mode next month. Apple Intelligence can perform multiple tasks, including assisting users to rewrite, proofread and summarize text anywhere, including mail, notes, pages and third-party apps. Users can also record, transcribe and summarize audio in the notes and phone apps. Participants are automatically notified when a call is being recorded, and once the call ends, Apple Intelligence generates a summary.
Apple has unveiled its iPhone 16 with new AI features.
The next generation of iPhone has been designed for Apple Intelligence from the ground up.
Apple Intelligence is the name of the company's artificial intelligence software. It'll be used to improve Siri, Apple's personal assistant, as well as enhancing camera features.
Apple Intelligence marks the start of a new era for Siri and makes it more natural, more contextually relevant, and more personal to you.
Tech companies around the world are racing to add AI to products, and phones are expected to be one of the most important battlegrounds. Apple's announcement on Monday came just hours after its Chinese rival Huawei racked up 3 million pre-orders for its trifold phone.
Instead of seeing the first couple lines of your emails, you'll see summaries that convey the most useful information. Your notifications will be summarized too, helping you quickly get the gist.
A test version of Apple Intelligence will be available in the US version of the English language next month, with versions in Chinese, French, Japanese, and Spanish coming next year. But these upgrades will take time to reach consumers in China. Apple Intelligence must be approved by Beijing in order to be released in the country. Last year, iPhones accounted for more than half of Apple's $383 billion sales. Apple is betting that the AI feature will drive consumers to upgrade, as it sees a slowdown in iPhone sales.
American actor James Earl Jones, best known for being the voice of the Star Wars villain Darth Vader, has died at the age of 93. Jones starred in dozens of films including Field of Dreams, Coming to America, Conan the Barbarian and The Lion King. He was best known for giving the Star Wars supervillain Darth Vader his distinctive and gravelly voice. He was also the voice of Mufasa in The Lion King.
Acclaimed actor James Earl Jones, the voice of Star Wars supervillain Darth Vader, died Monday at the age of 93. His agent did not cite a cause of death, but said Jones, a longtime diabetic, was surrounded by his family in his last moments. In interviews, Jones said he loved playing the part of Darth Vader and of being part of the Star Wars myth.
When I walk out tonight, there'll be kids with posters to be signed. It doesn't haunt me. I love it. I love that I was a part of that cult.
His deep, booming voice took on a career of its own. Jones voiced Mufasa in The Lion King and won a Grammy for Best Spoken Word Album, Great American Documents, in 1977. But the voice didn't come naturally to Jones. As a child, he had to overcome a stutter, and he even stopped speaking because of it, staying mostly silent until high school. An English teacher got him to speak up and recite to the class a poem. After that, Jones said he learned to control the stutter and became interested in acting. Over the decades, Jones played many leading Shakespeare roles, including Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, and Othello. He received Tonys for stage work in The Great White Hope in 1969 and Fences in 1987. And on television, he received Emmys in 1991 for Gabriel's Fire and Heatwave. In 2011, he was given an honorary Oscar for extraordinary distinction in lifetime achievement.
Frankly, what the heck else would you call that but an actor's wet dream?
His bass-heavy tones were also heard in dozens of television commercials. For several years, CNN used Jones's authoritative "This is CNN" to introduce its newscasts.
And finally, popular South Korean music band and Tommy Hilfiger brand ambassador Stray Kids caused an online frenzy when they became the first K-pop group to attend the Met Gala in May this year. They are just one of an ever-increasing number of K-pop idols who luxury fashion houses are enlisting as they seek to tap into their global fan base.
K-pop fans were in a frenzy in May when all 8 members of Stray Kids made history as the first Korean group to attend the Met Gala. All of them decked out in custom Tommy Hilfiger tuxedos as the collective face of the brand's spring campaign. Hilfiger himself looks back fondly on that moment.
And we did a special label